What's going on, Skullbrains? Let's see if our trio of survivors ever wake up from their deep slumber in the next issue of The Ancestral Trail.
When he, who is the Chosen One, shall tread upon the ancient path, and battle there to overcome
the forces of the dark.
The Ancestral Trail, an epic story of myths, magic, and monsters. Book 18, Kronis, the Winged Lion. Fight for freedom in the Whispering Maze.
That's right, in the last episode, our heroes waded through leech-infested waters to battle Gator, the king of the shadowy swamps. Zard, the leader of the reptiles, makes the fatal blow, and our heroes reclaimed another life force pod. Orkin is finally released from the spell of the Evil One, and the forces of good part ways, Zard and his soldiers returning to the Ancestral City, while Richard, Orkin and Melik set off in an old boat in the search for the next life force pod. However, as they get further out to sea, a deep sleep falls upon all of them. So, let's find out what happens, but before we do, have you seen the Ancestral Challenge for this episode? If not, you can check it out here, and then stick around to the end of the video to find out the answers. Are you ready? Let's do this.
On the 18th day, a treasure now regains its sheen. When past water thrice has been, leads them streetwise through a maze, to our hero's captured gaze. Return with rope to lead him out, but death of evil is in doubt. Who once was brave is braver now. Fight the waves from stern to prow.
Heavy waves rocked the little boat, awakening the three companions with a jolt. They were lost at sea. Gripping the gunwales, they watched as first the prow of the boat, then they themselves vanished into thin air. It was as if a curtain of invisibility was being dragged along the length of the boat. One moment the current swelled, and the next, the sea was empty. Then the canoe was back in the sea again. Before the companions, across suddenly calm waters, lay an island. They had passed through a web of illusion into a realm undetectable from outside. This must be the land of dreams the prophecy mentioned before, Richard mused, as he surveyed the island ahead. A colossal arch straddled the approaches to a harbour, and the current was pushing them towards it. They shipped paddles and waited until their prow bumped against the harbour walls. The three clambered ashore, and Orkin made the boat fast. At the far end of the waterfront stood an ancient lighthouse, and beyond the quayside stretched a network of narrow streets. They were deserted, yet Richard had an eerie feeling that something was there. Fluid shadows slipped and slid around the buildings every time he looked. The trio strode into a street lined with the remains of grand houses. As they moved ahead, Richard heard a flapping sound from above. He looked up. Flying at them out of the sun was a monstrous winged lion. "Run!" Richard shouted. The three sprinted into one of the mansions. They just made it to safety before a thunderous blow rocked the house, sending them sprawling on the floor. A second impact followed the first as the lion charged against the outer wall. Then the beast tried a different tactic. He reached a paw inside the room, sending the three running to the end of the hall. The lion's paw scrabbled around, but could not find its prey. The lion gave up. With a loud roar, it flew off into the sky. Huddled in a corner, the trio waited for the coast to clear, then looked at the Book of Prophecies. "A treasure?" Richard said thoughtfully, taking the amulet out of his pocket. Its old spark and glow were back. "The prophecy's right," he exclaimed. "Regains a treasure its sheen. It's the third time we've crossed water and the amulet's back to normal." "What about the rest?" Melik asked. I'd say we have to find someone in a maze, somewhere in these streets. The trio left the house and darted from door to door, in case they had to make a quick escape. At the end of the street, their way was blocked by a high wall, in which was set a heavy door. It swung open before Richard's touch, to reveal a maze of arched corridors that led to further mysterious corridors. The three marched through the door. Richard seemed sure of the way. Gripping the amulet tight in his hand, he felt as if Golan were giving him unspoken directions. As they walked, the three could see dark shapes fleeing before them, and they could hear faint whispers like the echoes of rumored conversations. Finally, the trio came to a tall archway that opened onto a sheer-sided arena. In the middle, tethered to a carved pillar, was a unicorn. Its coat gleamed silvery white, and its single horn shone with a pearly brilliance. Lustrous, turquoise eyes gazed nervously at the three strangers. "It's all right. We've come to rescue you," Richard said as he drew near. He told the unicorn who he was, and held up Golan's amulet, as if to prove his identity. "I am Tusker, guardian of the mythical beasts," the unicorn said with obvious relief. "Kronis, the winged lion, made me his prisoner, and took my habit and dagger. Only they can cut me free." "We've seen Kronis already," Orkin said briefly. "You've done well to escape him then," Tusker said. "A single scratch from his claws delivers enough poison to kill an army." The three shuddered at the thought. "Where are your weapons?" Richard asked. "We'll get them back for you." "In Kronis' lair, on top of the old lighthouse near the harbour. Beware though," Tusker warned. "Kronis keeps a close eye on his domain. He'll be waiting for you." They bade farewell and ran to the door. "Did you notice any shadows following us?" Richard asked as they started off. "Yes," Malik said. "Some of the shapes look like incredible beasts described in Morbane's book." "How are we going to find our way back?" Orkin cut in sharply. Richard thought for a moment. "We'll tie one end of the rope to the side of the archway and unwind it as we go," he said. Malik's rope had stretched miraculously before. Maybe it would do so again. Then they could follow it back to Tusker once they had found his weapons. As Richard suspected, the rope did stretch. It snaked out and lengthened behind them as they struggled back along the way they had come. For a while, Richard's memory seemed to be holding up. Then they came to a corridor that nobody recognized. They were lost. Richard was about to lead them back along the rope when a familiar shadow descended upon them. Kronis was back. They ran for their lives, twisting and turning along strange corridors, all the time trying to throw off their pursuer. He had the advantage. At one terrible moment, they were cornered in a dead end. Luckily, the space was tight, and their flashing daggers sharp. Unable to maneuver, Kronis retreated with blood gushing from the pads of his paws. The three fled heedless of direction, trying only to evade the lion's claws. Suddenly, Richard gave a shout. They were back at the entrance to the maze. They scurried through the door and ran for the nearest building. Leaning against the dusty bowl of an indoor fountain, Richard sighed in despair. They had escaped with their lives, but they would never find their way back to Tusker. Malik was bound to have dropped the rope when Kronis attacked. "Well, the rope worked for us again," Malik said proudly. The scribe was sitting against a huge fireplace, his feet crossed restfully over faded marble squares. Elated, Richard ran over and hugged the little scribe. He had kept hold of the rope all that time. At least they could find their way straight back to Tusker. The trio sneaked out into the street and made their way to the harbour. The lighthouse loomed before them, a square tower topped by battlements that had once held signal fires. As they got closer, a telltale trail of fresh blood indicated that Kronis had returned to nurse his wounds. The three approached cautiously. An old, weather-beaten door barred entry to the lighthouse. "You stay here," Richard ordered Malik. "You haven't got a dagger, and you'll only be in the way." Richard and Orkin pushed open the door and started up a narrow staircase that climbed up the side of the wall. There was no rail, so they kept close to the wall, away from the central well that reached from the bottom to the top of the tower. Richard drew his dagger and Orkin strung an arrow. Running up the remaining treads, they burst into Kronis' lair. The lion was in one corner, licking his wounded paws. Beside him lay Tusker's habit and dagger. Orkin moved like lightning. His first arrow struck Kronis' hind leg. His second hit him where his right wing joined the body. The lion reared up in pain. Then Richard showed true valor. Despite the lion's lethal claws, he was determined to get back the weapons that could free the Guardian. He darted forth and sliced his sword to and fro to fend off Kronis' paws. As the lion roared in agony, Richard snatched up the habit and dagger, then ran back to the top of the stairs as a hail of arrows sped from Orkin's bow. One sank deep into Kronis' lung, another pierced his throat. Orkin quickly shouldered his bow and followed Richard down the stairs. Casting a backward glance, he saw Kronis pluck the arrows from his hide and scrabble in their direction. Orkin and Richard ran down the stairs and crashed through the door, dizzy and panting. Pulling Malik behind them, they made their way back to the maze entrance. They followed the rope back to Tuska's arena. Richard rushed forward, prepared to hack away at the coils with Tuska's dagger, but it sliced through the thick rope with magical ease. When the Guardian was free, Richard handed him the habit and dagger. Leaving Tuska no time to stretch his stiffened limbs, Orkin shouted for them to move. "Kronis is still alive! I saw him crawling after us," he warned. The four of them ran from the arena. Malik collected the rope as he went. In the same manner as it stretched, it now shrank miraculously. When they finally came out of the maze, the rope had regained its old length. As the four came in sight of the old lighthouse, a host of shadows seemed to materialize around them. Kronis had managed to crawl down the stairs. The thickening shadows advanced upon the wounded monster. Then Tuska gave out a command, and the lion was smothered by half-formed shadows that flocked to coat him in a flickering mantle of death. Soon Kronis had disappeared. Richard wondered whether the lion's very life force was being absorbed by the shadows. He watched, mesmerized, as color flooded into their bodies, and they grew more substantial. Now he could make out the shapes of horned beasts and dragons with enormous wings. Some creatures seemed to be made up of several animals, others bore no resemblance to anything he had ever seen. Tuska seemed to sense his awe and turned to the trio. "These are my forces," the unicorn said. "They are mythical beasts, the half-believed figments of legend. This is our city, but when Kronis imprisoned me, my forces became mere shadows. They were left with no strength and no power, yet you can see them filling out even now. When Kronis dies, they will be flesh again." Richard was dumbfounded. He signaled to his companions, and with Tuska the trio walked down to the shore. They climbed into their boat and said goodbye. As the unicorn stepped forward to bid them farewell, the emerging army of myth behind him was still gaining in solidity. "We'll be seeing you soon," Tuska said as they pushed off from the quay. The companions paddled as hard as they could. They were deep in thought. As he rowed away, Richard fancied that he could see a strange sea creature becoming real flesh and bone. He did not know quite what force had been released on that strange island, but whatever it was, he was glad it was on their side. As the three crossed the invisible curtain that separated the island from the rest of the ancestral world, the sea turned rough. A full-blown storm was brewing. Black waves marched from horizon to horizon, tossing their frail craft brutally across the ocean. One moment they sloshed in a lightless trough, the next they balanced on a peak, staring in terror at near vertical slopes. Their paddles made little impact against such conditions, and their boat was filling with water. When they embarked on this journey, they had been nearly sunk by illusion. Now it seemed as if they were going to sink in reality. And that is the end of issue number 18. So how did you go with the Ancestral Challenge? Shumi and Shubi were hiding here on page 281. Pretty hard to miss. And what about Tuska's weapons? His dagger was on page 280 and the habit on page 284. Did you hear the clue to what life force pod Richard rescued in the shadowy swamps? It was on page 282. The page describes how Richard was able to climb a long stairwell and slice to and fro, dodging Kronis' deadly claws. He found the Pod of Endurance. In the pinned comment below, you'll find a link to download the monsters and magic cards for this issue. Have a read and see if you can guess who Kronis is based on, and I'll reveal the answer in the next episode. In this issue, there were no letter tokens or map pieces to collect, but there will be more. Thanks so much for watching this episode. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button and ring that little bell icon to be notified of when the next issue is released, and it will really help the channel out. So, until next time, stay tuned and stay skullbrained.